Hi. So today I am doing an Insta live with Sangeeta Parthasarathy. She is a therapist and working with the body and somatics, and she's also working with intergenerational trauma. And she's from India, studied engineering, and then got into kind of exploring her own calling. So that's I'm going to now try to invite her, and yeah, I can see her there.
Hi,
Yeah.
Shammi.
Hi, Sangeeta.
All right. How are you?
Super. I'm good. I'm enjoying the Jaipur winter a little bit,
Yes.
and it's good. And yeah, quite a few exciting things are happening, and I'm getting a lot of ideas on how to take my work to people's homes, like a home delivery of my conflict resolution work. People can call me, and I can go to their homes. So I'm thinking of some other ideas because I work with food and also, so I'm quite excited about things and also happy to be here with you. And I've heard a lot about you from one of our colleagues, Rohini. She's also here right now in the like she's seeing the live. So she and
Hello.
also I've been in touch with you before. So
Yes, yes. I'm,
yeah,
I'm really happy that we can make this time. I know that
yeah,
we've probably been connected for about a year, and I've been following your work, and somehow the
yeah,
live just kept getting postponed. And,
yeah,
today I thought, yes, this is the time. And
yeah,
I really appreciate the work you do. I follow you on Instagram, and, gently your approach to things, especially children. And
yeah,
I think it's much needed. Hello, Rohini.
yeah. Rohini saying hello. Great. Yeah. So should we begin our conversation?
Absolutely. Yes.
So maybe before we start, even though I shared a small introduction about you, can you share a little bit about yourself? So
Sure.
then before that, yeah.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Chennai, and then I went to BITS Pilani, and then I went to the US for my master's, and then I worked in tech, and uh, was a part of a lot of the tech, uh, acquisition space, and then did management consulting, strategy consulting, moved to the UK. That's where we had our children, and yeah, my girls were born there, and I was doing strategy consulting at that time, and uh, not quite as dramatic as it was not like a one day, dark night of the soul type event, but things, sometimes that are sort of in the background just sort of have a way of showing themselves. And
Yeah.
then I actually became a doula, maternity sort of advocacy space in the global, wrote thought leadership pieces, and, did all of that, built an online birth coaching program, which before COVID was not a thing, in India. So we moved back just a bit before COVID. And then, yeah, built and ran a birth coaching business here in India and was a doula. And then in parallel, a lot of what would happen is I was trained in birth trauma, and then that's what got me very interested in trauma. Then became a somatic experiencing practitioner, therapist, coach, and now I work with high achieving women on their nervous systems. So that's a
Great. So
really quick,
quite a diverse journey which you have brought in a short span, which you shared about in a short span of time. But I hear you that there was no dark night of the soul, but I guess there were gray moments of life which
I
you
think so.
made you reflect and you gradually started seeing things. So yeah, so it's the journey has been interesting from from engineering to a tech industry and then to being a doula. So that was the first transition probably, and even choosing a home
Yes.
birth because I just want to share one more thing that I have made a film on home birth, which I'll share it with you maybe later on. It's called Leap of Faith, and if you go and put Shammi Nanda, you can find it. But I've been excited about these things: home birthing, natural living, unschooling. So I made a film on that also. So, anyways, I'm just excited about like so. Yeah, when people start doing one thing, they start doing other things also. There's
You're
such a
exactly
correlation.
right.
You start thinking about the food and how do you what kind of a healing modalities you want to use for Ayurveda or whatever natural healing. So first transition was that the coming to being a doula also. So how was that, from the tech industry to being yourself a high achiever, and just to check, this high achiever is a term that was created by you, or people have been talking about this term for a long time?
I suppose it's been around for a while.
Okay,
I
yeah.
don't think I've created anything, but
But I thought you had, maybe I didn't know that, but I heard Swati and you talking about it, so I was just wondering
yeah.
where
I
did
think
this word
it's
come from?
describing a specific personality, I suppose. But yeah, I think the home birth was the start of everything. I think a year before we started trying, uh, a very good friend of mine in the UK was pregnant, and she was planning a home birth. And then my husband and I were like, this is not us, is it? Kind of, it was very out there for us at that point. And I'd gone to her baby shower, and she had her friends, bit of history, like she's sort of Mexican and British, and she was born in like a nursing home in the UK at that time, and her mom was you know quite sort of a very interesting, holistic person, and so her friend circle, and so somebody mentioned this book. You've probably read it. It's The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, Thomas Verney. So he was like the father of pre and perinatal psychology. It's a very dated book. So like for the viewers, I mean, you have to situate it in that context, right? Like people read Aina May
Yes.
today, and they find her work. It's like that, right? So
Yeah,
this
it's
is
like there's a certain style of writing which is very classical in a way, but
not
the
just
idea that she's,
correct. So like it's not just the work. I mean,
yeah,
if you look at it with today's lens, some of those things may
things,
not hold. I mean, like
yeah,
the patriarchy and the gender roles and all of that, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the context, but it's still like super eye-opening and all of that. So like long before we even thought of having a child, maybe a year before, I just bought that book on a whim because she mentioned it in that baby shower, and it was just very interesting, and then I just wolfed through that book in one go, I think. And I was like, wow, this makes so much sense. And then, obviously in India, you grow up hearing, the Abhimanyu effect, and how, he was in utero, and, you grew up hearing these stories, right? So like somehow it's inbuilt into the psyche about how a child's in utero experience can shape up how they turn out to be as adults. And we had some examples of it in my own home with my paternal grandma, being stressed when she had her last child, and sort of how they turned out. And so you would hear these vocal sort of stories. So somehow there was a connection between the in utero life and how it shaped us as humans when we grew. So I didn't have the words for it back then, not what I know now, but there's a certain pull towards it. And I think I've shared this before. It's amazing how certain things, dots just connect in a non-linear way. So when I was 21, I was a master's student in computer science in the US, and I was writing my thesis, right? So a lot of analytical brain math, whatever, right? So so now I know the language for it. And so I would write short fiction in order to help me sort of stay focused. So that was my sort of escape. And then the first short fiction that I wrote and published was about a home birth in rural Tamil Nadu, where the baby was breech, and there's a midwife, traditional midwife, young lady who comes and actually like facilitate the child's delivery, right? And there are all these onlookers. I'll send it to you. But
Sure.
I had at 21, I had not witnessed a birth. I knew nothing about birth, nowhere around it, nobody, but it's so weird why I wanted to write that. And then, of course, many years later, this has become my life's work. So I also really think that there is somehow these dots that connect. And so I think there has been a pattern. So yeah, so in talking to her, and then I was sort of very cautiously curious, and then through her we learned how a home birth works in the UK, which is still pretty sort of supported, and in the sense that there are midwives, there are doulas. If something goes wrong, there's an ambulance. So it's like the best of both worlds kind of thing. And then I remember this. Her baby came, I don't know, maybe 5-6 days after the technical due date, and then she was nesting, she was folding the clothes and all that. 2 days after her due date, I just went to see her, and she was so calm, and never seen anything like it in India. Nobody goes over their due date. People are, 38 weeks in C-section, all of that, right? And so it's just so amazing how cool she was about the whole thing. And then her baby was born in her home in their living room with midwives, and it was beautiful. And for her, it was like sort of I wouldn't say, yeah, maybe like a norm, right? Because in her world, it was, I mean, not her world, but her mother's world. But that got us curious. And so when our time came, we were still very sort of, this is not for us, right? Sort of. And then we're like, okay, let's just call a doula. We'll talk to them. And then that first meeting was amazing. And then we did hypnobirthing. And the amazing thing is it was very, very logical too. Like my husband has a PhD. He's also very analytical. And so it made sense to us how once you understand the anatomy, this is how the brain and the body works, it's logical, it makes sense. So when I was a hypnobirthing teacher, that's what I would tell all my clients. The mothers would come, but then the fathers would come. They're like, hypno, what? This is some woo nonsense. But the first session, they get so hooked because it's logical, right? It makes sense. And then, people use those skills beyond birthing. Like I've had couples tell me that they were able to use it in career settings or just in life in general. So anyway, so that is what got us interested. We did our research. We took a lot of courses. So we invested in hypnobirthing. We invested in a doula. We invested in the local communities and the water birth and all of that. That's how the first birth was planned. And then mid-labor, we transferred in, but it was a planned transfer. Everything was it was not a scary situation. And then the rest of the birth happened in the hospital, still very beautiful. And then my second one was born at home, in the pool, no interventions, no internal exams, nobody touched her. I was the first to bring her out. And, midwives and doulas were there, but nobody needed to intervene, right? So I brought her out of the water and onto my chest myself, which was just so amazing. And I think, I'm not a very active person. I've never been an active person, and I've not been the ideal size. I've always had a few extra pounds, and I've struggled with weight and body image issues and all of that, right? So that was one of those things. Like, if my body could do that, what else can it not do? And then all these things about my strategy consulting job and potentially having to go back and work for the person you hired or that worked for you or whatever it is, and all that, it didn't make sense anymore. Like, it was like, if I could do this, I could surely, what else can I not do, right? It was one of those kind of feelings. So that's what started the journey, the search.
So I'm hearing this line that you said, very interesting line. Maybe you or me, we can write a blog on this. It's like, this is not for us, So it's a very interesting line, because so many times, when things start off, earlier, I was having all kind of dairy and animal foods and all. And when I met first time these friends who are in Sadhana Forest in Auroville, I met them around 20 years ago. And I asked them, do you want to have tea? Because I was hosting a gathering in the forest. And they said, no, we don't take anything which is tied to the 24 hours. I said, almost like, this is not for us. What are these crazy people, So so many changes happen where first when they come to you, it's like a totally radical thing. And so my question is that, how was it that you and your partner, were you having different ideas about it, or how did you come to terms and shared reality on that, or was it very easy,
So some more context is that, I think I've said this before. So I grew up in my early years. I grew up in a joint family where my father's younger brother was a doctor. So when the women in the family were pregnant and they had young infants, because there was a doctor in the house, it was very easy to pop a pill. So we didn't even do the normal, the kashayam, the home remedies for cold or home remedies for cough, whatever, right? So unfortunately, what that meant is the women in my family, all of them were very disconnected from their own bodies. So they had no when we would talk about birth, for example, and placenta and all that, I think I've said this before, my chitti, my doctor's, she couldn't even remember that placenta part, because like you're just submitting your body. It's very common for women of that generation to be completely dissociated from the birth process, and therefore not being able to really be there and support, because you've just dissociated from the body, right? So and then, in my in-laws side, I mean, my husband was also born in a nursing home and like with doctors, right? But I think I've been very fortunate that there was no resistance from like my in-laws side. They were like, oh, this is really nice, and oh, okay, this is a thing. So I don't think they were really questioning our decision. On my parents' side, I think there was a bit of hesitation or fear. But from my husband's point of view, what happened was we took it one step at a time, and we did it slowly and logically. And then we would go and read up, and it appealed to the logical side, right? Like it was not, if it was illogical, then we would maybe have a really, hard time to sort of come to the middle. But it logically made sense to him. So I think he was very supportive of everything. And we would, but it's we would also take it one step at a time, right? So in my first pregnancy, there was a thing about platelet counts. My gestational diabetes was borderline, so I had to be on not insulin, but I had to check my sugars after every meal. So then we went through that. So we just took it, and then at that point, you don't know if the home birth would be approved by the system, right? So then we had to talk to the system and negotiate and build a plan and all of that. And I think we did it as a team, and very fortunate that way. We didn't really have to fight about it, at any stage. So it was just like, let's take it one step at a time, and let's not get ahead of ourselves, and we'll just take it step by step, sort of thing.
And so then, what was the point there where you then you decided yourself to become a doula? Am I right?
Yeah. Oh, I say this now with blinding clarity because I know what it is. I didn't know it at that time, except to say that. So we had a doula both times, and oh gosh, her presence in our birth room, in our space, was just extraordinary. Like I did not have words to describe it back then, for both our births, she was there. And then especially for the home birth, my second one, she came in, and doulas, I don't know about any other doula, right? Because she's the one that I know. She had a way of just blending into the background and really what I now call supporting the couple's nervous system, right? So she was more like a couple's doula, right? And the way she would do it was so non-verbal, and she would sort of just know exactly when to retreat and when to come in, and it was like a dance, and all of it was non-verbal, right? There was no, most of it had to be non-verbal, because otherwise you're stimulating the thinking brain, and then home births don't work like that, right? So it was the first time, and so I say this now, right, like with this kind of language, is that I think that was the very first time I was actually truly held by a safe female nervous system. Oh, that was just life-changing, to be truly held in safety by a female nervous system. Like without making it about themselves, or without impulsivity, or without, there was no, her, I'm not, like I said, it's holding, it's just holding. And so you see that at births, right? So midwives would be sitting there, or doulas would be sitting there, and the birth's progressing, and they're just like, knitting or keeping busy, right? They are attuning to you. However, what they're embodying is just calm. This is there's no need for us to panic. I'm going to knit. There's a rhythm to it that the body can just mirror off of. My doula didn't it, but that's the image, right? So when you talk about like a home birth midwife or a home birth doula, that's the image of, I know when to come in, I'm not distracted. However, I'm not going to come in when I'm not needed, right? So there's a thing about respecting the space and knowing just how much of yourself that minute needs. Which was just mind-blowing for me, not mind-blowing. I think it was just something bodily. There's like my nervous system just landed for probably the first time. And then in this kind of a female, safe presence. And just truly extraordinary, right? That something happened in that birth room with her, and then I thought, wow, what is this? I want to be that. And so that's what started the doula journey. So then I became a hypnobirthing practitioner, I became a doula, and then I'm just very naturally sort of geeky, so like, did a lot of, say, academic but analytical work on the larger maternity landscape. So publishing thought pieces, writing blogs, just became like a global voice. Attended a lot of the conferences, etc., and then came to India. And so I was doing the ground stuff, being a doula, and then launching my own birth coaching program, and then was a part of Birth India, been to many sort of then like central, global maternity initiatives and local maternity initiatives and all of that. So that's just, organically took a life of its own. Yeah.
That's one part of your journey, which must be very significant, and lots of deepening and ups and downs and growth would have happened. And then from that, you moved into, you talked about intergenerational trauma, and then you got into therapy. Am I right?
Correct. So so I became a somatic experiencing. Yeah. So when I was working in birth, I had done a bit of training on birth trauma and how to resolve it. So that was my first sort of foray into trauma and the nervous system and early attachment. So when you're a doula in the birth room, you can very clearly see what's going on there with respect to the baby's nervous system, the mother's nervous system, the partners, the family, the doctors, and you can see how that impacts the birth, the progress of the labor itself, right? So that's the connection, right? So as I was doing this, I think, and I was learning, there was this huge thing about, okay, the common denominator is the nervous system, because once you understand that, everything sort of is based off of that, right? So then in order for me to have deeper skills to address trauma during the pre and perinatal period, right? Like, so fertility issues, loss, miscarriage, difficult birth, unexpected cesarean, difficulty breastfeeding, guilt, all of those things, right? That and with early attachment, it really comes in, and this intergenerational trauma you would see play out in the birth room, like over and over again. So even with all the birth coaching and all the doula work, you can you go into the birth room and you can clearly see what's going on, right? So a lot of times then the couple would be like, we want her in the birth room, everybody keep away. And then you can find so much about the families by just being in the birth room, right? In terms of how they are attuned or connected to the laboring woman, who's at the center of this experience. Is there disconnection? Is there intergenerational trauma, right? Like, so much, like loudly talking on the phone. You see so much. The point is, that went beyond just birth coaching, right? So to deal with that, we had to get deeper into intergenerational family dynamics. and attachment related wounding or trauma, which would play out in the birth room. And it would affect the birth, it would affect the breastfeeding, it would affect early years, parenting, and all of that. So it was a very natural segue into becoming a somatic experiencing practitioner, especially focused on early attachment and developmental trauma, intergenerational trauma, because it was a very natural lead into that, right? So I was already doing pre and perinatal, I told you, right? So I trained with pre and perinatal work, nervous systems, and how, you know, maternal stress, etc., can cause in utero patterns that people then carry onto adult life. And so I was on that path anyway, and then somatic experiencing just sort of helped me bring it all together and have a richer language around it, and of course a lot more tools and all of that. So when I did that, my practice also expanded from working with women around the pre and perinatal period to just overall, you know, over a lifespan. So that's kind of how it evolved.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there are lots of different threads in it, you know. I'm just amazed and reflecting as I'm hearing you that so there is a lot of it that happens. Okay, there's a question also. I'll come to it, and people can ask questions also. So, so there is a lot that the society is not aware of, that what happens at the time of birth, which kind of shapes us, and what happens during when you are in the womb, you know, and what you hear and developmental effect. So there's a lot of it that happens so it's like a big blind spot. Would you say that?
Yes, there are big blind spots around that. Even today, I think it's not very mainstream or common knowledge as to how much of the way we are created, gestated, and birthed and fed, right? That sort of 0 to 7 sets up a neurological imprint for how we show up implicitly in the rest of our lives. But that also being said, the brain is amazing, right? There is this power of neuroplasticity, which means that we can rewire at any age. So it's not a life sentence or anything like that. However, when we bring conscious awareness to the implicit, then it allows us a bigger canvas for transformation and healing in a way that's very deep and powerful. So with all these threads and various things that I've done, I think the common thread is the nervous system, right? The nervous system, because then that brings the individual and the collective so beautifully together. I'll tell you why. Because
nervous system of the individual and the collective, nervous system of the collective, of the society, like people around them.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Correct. So this is the common thread, right? So we all we have, you know, our individual nervous systems. However, wired are predicated on consistent co-regulation experience, which is usually provided by the caregiver, right? Primary caregiver, example, the mother, right? Historically, traditionally. However, the mother is bringing her well-regulated nervous system to the child only when she is held in safety by the community, right? So we talk about this 2 layers of support. So when a baby is gestated in the womb, right? So there are 2 membranes, the amnion and the chorion. Just like that, you think of the baby being held by the mother or the primary parent and their well-regulated nervous system. But for them to stay regulated, they need a whole bunch of people to come around and hold that nervous system, right? And that's how communities were historically structured for that. Imagine that, you know, I call it the ventral vagal well, right? So imagine that you have some regulation and then you have some extra ability to regulate, right? That you put into a well. Then you can draw from it at various points during your life. And then it all evens out, right? So there is no power struggle there about you did this, I did that, because it's like a collective well that we can all both put into and draw from, you know. So historically, all collectives, communities, families, structures were structured around this idea, right? From a nervous system perspective. There are many gaps in it today, but once that's why for me it's fascinating, because once you bring in the nervous system, the individual and the collective comes together so beautifully in terms of how the individual nervous system interacts with the collective and vice versa.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of value of co-regulation, like I've seen children hanging out together, and maybe in a school kind of a scenario, which is a little bit alternate, and where I was also sharing things that, so one kid had come there, and initially the kid was very more lost or aggressive, and then when the space there was different, after some time, the kid, I saw him after some days, and then he was in a different space. He had much more in control of his life and less anxious. So I can imagine that part. But this new for me also. I mean, I've heard about this and intergenerational trauma and birthing. Still, I mean, there's a lot more to understand. And thanks for opening up this window. That it's not just what is happening right now. So there's one line which is like a conflict never happens between two people. It happens between maybe lakhs and millions of people. So those two people are bringing many other people. Whether psychologically, emotionally, societally, cultures. So it makes the problem look very vast, and at the same time, at least where you have to also focus on. So it's like
it is vast and also supremely simple at the same time, right? That's what I love about the work. This whole thing about connection versus correction, right? So there's always this thing about connect before you correct, whether it's adult, marital communication or partnered communication, or with the child. The idea is that when we bring co-regulation, there is safety, right? So once there is safety, then you can safely hold discomfort together, conflict together, while being an us. Right. So I talk about this as when you think about couples, for example, right? And this also, I think this is also your work, right? I think you do NVC with couples also.
Yeah. That's
Yeah. You think of it as like a one-person psychological or system versus a two-person psychological system, right? So when a couple feels happy enough couples, right, always do conflict differently, right? So when they're in conflict, they're still able to there is an usness about that, versus the minute that us bubble goes, there is the you versus me. So we're operating in separate time zones, right? So I'll tell you this. So when you think about the nervous system, ventral vagal, that is our first, these guys, right? So that is the one that tells your body whether you're safe or not. Then when that is threatened, we go into the fight. This is simplification, of course. So we go into the fight flight, where it's defense and attack and anxiety, panic attacks, yelling, right? Or we freeze, we shut down, which is the stonewalling, avoidance. I'm not, I'm going to shut you out, right? So when you think about the nervous system and a couple is in conflict, the minute they get out of the us, the ventral vagal, safety, they're both in protection mode, right? The body is in survival mode. And when the body neurologically is in a state of not connection, but protection, there is no way forward after that point, right? So the goal is to see if we can get back to the mutual usness, right? Before there is any conflict handling possible. Because when one person is in the fight zone, right? Fight flight, one person's body is sympathetically driven, like it's like boom, boom, let's go, rev, right? Then that's going to be blame, shame, aggression, yelling, God forbid, physical, whatever, right? It's going to be a lot of revving, right, in the system. And if the other person is parasympathetic dominant, which is the freeze or immobilization dominant, they're going to shut down as a way of protection. The point is, one is not morally superior to the other, because both people's bodies, nervous systems are screaming danger, 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 like threat, threat, threat. Therefore, there is no communication from that nervous system state, right? So the first thing to do is actually neurocept safety, right? It's not interception. It's like body to body, safety, right? So it's the same thing with children, right? So when they're melting down and when they're having tantrums, right? Culturally, I think we've just resorted to sometimes overuse of shame as a way to get people to comply. It usually happens when we are, time starved, for example, or we think that it's a quick way. And then I think toxic shame has become so cultural, right? And then that might get you compliance, but that's not going to build safety and trust with the child, right? One is quicker to do, the other takes time. But, that's the long-term way to build a child's nervous system to orient towards safety first, right? So, I'm connecting that to what you're saying about co-regulation in a children space, and the work that you do is simply by bringing your regulated nervous system to that space, the child's nervous system probably just lands, right? And once it feels safe, it can create, it can learn, it can do all sorts of things, right? Because the body is saying, okay, now you're connected, you're safe.
Yeah, great. So I think there are lots of things, and we can have a lot of conversations, and maybe I'd like to do another podcast where, we can, not an Insta live, but where it can be more at peace and ease,
Sure,
So
absolutely.
if you have any questions around this. There was a question where somebody asked me, why did you move out of being a doula?
Yeah, I've never shared that publicly, but I'm happy to do it now. I think there was a point where I didn't want to really share it in public, but now I can. What do we have time? We've got another. We have time. Yeah. What doula work? Every time I've been a doula, it's been it's a very deep experience for me. It is also a very deep experience for the birthing couple, and so there is it's a very deep experience, right? But that being said, in India, it's a very fear-driven, profit-driven medico-legal system, right? And understandably, at a government level and a state government level, I live in Tamil Nadu, where Tamil Nadu and Kerala are state governments that are super focused on SDG goals around infant and maternal mortality. We've managed to hit the infant mortality goals. We are still struggling, well, not struggling, but we're on the way to hit the maternal mortality goals, right? So if you think about it from a larger governmental perspective, there are initiatives and prerogatives. And I think I've been very lucky to live in one of the best public health systems in the country. So Kerala and Tamil Nadu have the best public health infrastructure systems in the country for maternal and infant mortality rates and all of that. So like kudos to the government and the doctors for doing what they're doing. That being said, when you work in an urban space, in a for-profit hospital, I've shared these statistics before. So I pulled out these statistics. I think that data is 5 years old, maybe 6 years. I don't think it's changed significantly in a positive direction. But if you take Chennai, the government reported numbers for primary cesareans, for low-risk mothers, first-time mothers, low risk, no comorbidities, no other, complications. In public, like government hospitals, it's like 53%. And in private hospitals, it is very high, 60 to 70%. This is published data, right? On ground data.
What? It's 53% of what? Of the
cesareans. First time low risk mothers. Yeah, yeah.
In government hospitals, cesarean is much lesser than the private hospitals.
Correct, exactly. So in private hospitals, the cesarean rates are very, very high. Therefore, so in the top private hospitals in Chennai, for primary low risk mothers, first time mothers, no comorbidity, no obesity, no gestational diabetes, no other complications, it is anywhere between 85 to 95%, right? So you could, if you look at a small sort of 40-bed hospital which does like 40 births a month, they could go through months and months with no vaginal births. I'm not talking about normal or natural births. I'm talking about vaginal births. Okay. There are some within this landscape, there are some institutions and doctors who are doing fantastic work. And I have been very fortunate to have built their trust to be able to go in and serve women in hospital. Not, there are exceptions in Chennai, but the key thing being that they are exceptions, right? So, but even in that scenario, right, what is very, very normal is not wanting to wait beyond 40 weeks, induction, episiotomy, right? So episiotomy rates are like 99%. It's like regular because there's this myth that it's going to prevent third degree tears, which it doesn't. There's a whole story. And fundal pressure, to put pressure while when you look at that and when you look at best practice, we're nowhere close, right? So it is doubly traumatizing sometimes to work in that setup because even with all of that, you're creating big impact, and the couple are having the best birth that they could possibly have in a hospital setting, and it's life changing, all of that, right? So, but it doesn't feel enough to me. I just could not operate like that with, maybe I call me impulsive, I don't know, but it is still very far from best practice for me. And these are things out of my control. It's not a one person thing, right? So for me, when I look at, it's not, I quit my job, became a doula, I'm doing this impact, and see, if it's not the money, you should at least have that very deep soul level satisfaction, right? Like to do the work, right? So it would feel very disappointing, right? And it's very, very hard to do that. I've been to many hospitals where I go in and then they see, oh, there's BITS, there's Harvard. Oh, you're going to look great on my website. So, you can come and join and work here, but you're not allowed to say anything, right? And then they would not really understanding anything about what we do and not having, there are a lot of hospitals that control what you can teach for labor management, right? So all of those things, I think it was just
there was a dissonance, like your values and the way you chose your life to live with authenticity and the things that you wanted to bring, you could not bring in that system, as an individual. There were not enough support structures for that. So we found it very frustrating, and it's not working for you to go on,
That's one thing, but also I'll say this, right? So because somebody asked that question, I'm guessing they have something to do with maternity. That being said, I want to put out a very important message for anybody that is working in maternity in India, is that we do need more of you. I think there is a place for everybody in this system. And through this, one of the personal sort of growth areas for me is also to figure out my place my place in the revolution, right? So, this change is going to take 3 generations, right? If not more, but every bit matters, right? And then it is also, for me, has been a very humbling personal growth journey to figure out where my part is in this space. And for me, it's the nervous system, right? Holding the nervous system. So I have done I used to very regularly offer somatic support and tools for people in the birth work, right? Like doulas and, lactation consultants, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, people that are around for birth. And I've had pediatricians, OBs, people that come to my course and learn about the nervous system and how important it is. I've trained many breastfeeding professionals in like international capacity to augment their knowledge with very essential nervous system skills and early attachment skills. Therefore, they take it to work. So that's a side thing that I do, which is like my passion project, and I hope to do more of it this year. That's not a thing. I just do it through nonprofits and things like that. So I have also, I think, figured out my place in this puzzle in a way that is not draining for me, while also thinking about what best I can offer to this revolution, right? So like, if you're interested in birth and creating change, like you, Shammi, for example, you did a documentary. That's great, right? That's your place in the revolution, right? Like that's your contribution to collective change. That's amazing, right? So I feel like the pie is so big that there is enough space for a lot of people to come in and find their own places in the picture. So I think I've done that now. So
I think it's beautiful what you say. My space in the revolution, because oftentimes when I'm also part of a change making process, there are moments when I'm tired, exhausted, I don't align with the values there, and it's like, it sounds like, oh, I'm abandoning the cause, there's a lot of guilt around it, oh, ultimately there's a forest and we need to save it, even though we are fighting to save it. I don't like the process. So I've gone through it, and so it's very soothing for me, and also to be assured that there are other people who would be filling that place, if I'm not there. So to kind of me getting burnt out. So I really appreciate your wisdom and self-connection, and it's a guidance that I'm taking, and it's going to be very valuable, for me and for other people. And thank you for sharing this so honestly and openly.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I think a burnt out nervous system, like in our place in the activism or revolution, right? Sometimes I think there is a lot of focus on speaking up. There is a lot of focus on performing activism in a certain way. And there is a lot of focus on performing activism with the sympathetic fight-flight reaction. Right, that's what I keep going back to, right? Like the most useful thing that we can do, or a person can do, is whether you're fighting actively for a cause, or whether you're supporting other people for a cause, or doing your own thing. The idea is that you engage with it in the ventral vagal, safe, connected way, right? Because otherwise, when we burn out, then we're acting out, right? And then we're just going to have a bunch of dysregulated nervous systems that tear each other down, and ultimately the cause is lost, right? So I came into birth work as this blazing activist. Like if you look at some of my older videos, I was very sort of the sympathetic activation driven. I still have that, but what I also now have is a lot of ventral vagal energy, which is the regulation, which is the safety and connection. Therefore, I can take an honest look at myself. I think a lot of people come into revolution with like that rescuer, savior sort of minds. A lot of people come into birth work because they've had either really bad births or they've had very, very good births. And then sometimes unknowingly we become like rescuers, and then that's not our, so it's also been a very ongoing, as my nervous system has healed and continues to heal. I am very comfortable with finding a place for me that is also nourishing for me, right? Because if I burn out, there's no point serving my clients with a dysregulated nervous system. So
finding a place and also maybe moving out of some places, because there's a lot of, I can tell you, I have faced guilt there. So I feel more reassured that it's okay. It's a part of, what you say, a connected nervous system for me to, how do I make that choice rather than being there and keep fighting and making other people change, or to step back and let other people do the fight the way they want to do it, and go with the mourning. I mean, it's not a very exciting thing, like, of course you could have a grief around that and humility, but it's not that it's all part that it's fine. But yeah, but to hold it with another kind of a regulated nervous system kind of a mindset, like with you.
Yeah, it took me 2 years from the point that I knew this something needed to change to when I actually like sort of revectored it. It took me about 2 years. I went through a lot of shame and guilt for abandoning the cause, and so I had, I mean, it's like our process of working through all of that. But now I think this is my place in the world where I'm able to create impact in the world in a way that is not abandoning myself. It's not self-abandonment, it's not burnout, it's not using burnout as a badge of honor, which a lot of the rescuing savior type activists, which all of us come into at some point and then sort of find our way, right? So
there's no blame in that. There's no blame about it. I mean, there is a journey.
There's no blame whatsoever.
In our evolution, in our growth, there's a journey. And
absolutely, absolutely. Because if you don't have that, you won't come into this work at all, right? I mean, people need this work. So there's no shame or blame about that. I think it's...
you have the dark moments, once in a while, for you
absolutely.
To move on. Yeah. You were saying something, sorry, last.
No, I was saying it took about a year and 8 months. I needed external validation. I needed to actually talk to my mentors in the birth world, and for them to say that it's okay, you're not a quitter, you've done your work, and follow your passion. So I needed external validation and all of that. So I've been through all of that. I'm just sharing this because that's okay, right? Like, people go through that.
I'm really grateful for this, because I was part of a group and a movement where I was like in and out. And I was almost out, but still, for the namesake I was there, it was giving me that space to now to really step out of it, even formally, because nobody knows I'm out of it, but I was not participating in it. And it was happening, I was giving my name to it, so I feel lighter in this conversation. So really grateful to you for bringing this here.
You're very welcome.
Great. Thank you, Sangeeta. We'll plan more things, and I can imagine more collaborations and more things we can. I mean, there's an idea of community and community of space and community of practice. So I feel a sense of community with you. So I'm really grateful for your willingness to come for this session and to this share.
Same here. I think it's it's lovely what you do, and much needed work. So thank you.
It's a lot to learn from you. I'm gonna catch you, after the session sometime. But I'll post it this video.
Let's do it. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye.
Take care. Bye.